Hi everyone. Just a short video here as I wrap up the events of the day and get ready for bed. A couple of people have commented on my recent videos about free will and determination, discussing the antinatalists, and that's sort of the tangent that we've got off on at this point. And I wanted to clarify a couple of things just with regards to my own personal position on particularly the issue of determinism and free will. I mentioned in a video recently that free will is probably a bit of a misnomer. At least it leads to, I think, mischaracterization, misunderstanding. And, obviously the term free will, the free part makes it sound so very all-encompassing. And so I've had a couple of people sort of say, well, you're not free to do things that you can't conceive of or you haven't learned of yet. And you're certainly not free to do things that are physically impossible. And I guess the frustration that I would have is I'm not sure of any free will proponents who are suggesting such a thing. I mean, essentially what's being suggested here is omniscience and omnipotence, right? And that if you don't have those things, you have no free will. And that's not the argument that's being made by people who are proponents of free will. Certainly not myself anyway, which is the only person I can really speak for. And I suggested the term rational will in response to a comment about the whole subject. And really, I think that's more probably accurate definition. Now, that's not rational, in other words, to mean that every choice made is a rational choice. You can rationally arrive at an irrational choice, right? It's sort of the act of rationalizing versus the rationality of any given statement or choice or argument or something like that. So you can still be irrational. I mean, we talk about how people rationalize bad behavior, for instance. So in other words, the action itself might be irrational, but how the person arrives at that choice may be a rational exposition of, or a rational analysis of things, and maybe even, a dishonesty with oneself in the way that is gone about. But I think rational will is a little bit more clear in terms of what it is that we mean when we talk about free will. The determinism argument, especially when it comes to people like Gary and Mendham and Sam Harris, is more along the lines of what I would almost call a meat computer. That's sort of what we've got going on here, that this D factor that we have going on, the culmination of all of your genetics, your experience, your culture, all the information that you've gleaned over the years, and potentially even your mood and blood sugar levels, for all we know, at the moment of making that decision, results in a decision that could not have been made otherwise. You just simply would not make another decision. And what concerns me about that, or what I find interesting about that, is, to me, that is literally the death of reason, because what's being argued here is essentially that we're not reasoning. This meat computer has been dissociated from us as an individual, and that this is just a calculus that's taking place. So that's why I would sort of call it the meat computer argument. I've watched the Sam Harris discussion, or the Sam Harris speech that was given at the Sydney Opera House, the Festival of Dangerous Ideas, which for me is forever tainted by the speech given there by Alyssa Nutting, the whole affair, just the name of that conference. And I don't think she was there at the earlier ones where Sam Harris gave his speech, but he gave a speech on free will and determinism. It's the illusion of free will, I think it's called, and it might even be the delusion of free will. And I've watched it before, but it was a few years ago, and so I watched it again at the prompting of someone in the comments section who had remarked that I felt that we have choice. And I watched it again, and I'm probably going to make a sort of a semi-rebuttal, or at least just an internal critique video, because while I would not suggest in the slightest that I am the intellectual equal to Sam Harris, the whole argument is full of holes, and there's a lot of things that need to be criticized about the way that he puts forth the argument and the argument itself. There's a lot of assertions that are made that are certainly not rooted or based in any kind of sound evidence, and there are a lot of conclusions that are made that are, question begging and mere assertion, not really good arguments, and really almost some sophistry, I hate to say, and it's not really ever good. And I think, when it comes to those kind of things, people who agree with the position have a tendency to gloss over those things. I mean, I think, there is a part of determinism that is true. I would be reluctant to call myself a compatibilist, mostly because I don't like adopting labels. The labels themselves have a tendency to lead towards mischaracterizations and misunderstandings. But clearly, we are constrained by physical possibilities and the information that we certainly have available to us, and even our intelligence quotient and certain other factors. We are bound by those. We are restricted by those when we do exercise our rational will. And again, I'm not sure that any free will proponent was ever suggesting that one could free will themselves $1 million, free will themselves ambidexterity or a third eye or anything like that. Those were not part of the argument for free will. But I don't think I would call it free will myself anymore. I might call it a rational will, and I would defend reason. And I would defend reason in particular because I do think that it's still, there are many examples and reasons why I think that is still what we do, even if it's at the subconscious level rather than the conscious aware level. And I would think as a pragmatic issue, I think it's really, really important to our continued progression as a species and our civility. And the one thing I will say, I'll make all these arguments when I make a rebuttal video or a response video or an internal critique of Sam Harris's speech. But the one thing I will say that I do appreciate about Sam Harris's speech is at least at one part he was consistent with his worldview. In other words, he asserted that determinism is a fact and that there's no such thing as free will. And as such, he suggested that we might want to adopt more of a banish rather than punish for wrongdoers, for evildoers, for people who break the law and that sort of thing, because there really can be no, there'd be no moral choice when a person has no choice. If one really is sort of a meat computer, then you can't assess blame really in the same sense that you could if that person is making a reasoned decision, knowing the pros and the cons and the goods and the bads, et cetera, and still making the choice, the unfortunate choice to do evil. And so I appreciate that little bit of consistency, although he's inconsistent in other areas, which I'll point out if I make the video. But again, this is unlike Emendham's inconsistency, which is really, for me, what started this whole issue in the first place. So I just wanted to clarify that. I would never make the case that we have ultimate free will beyond physical impossibility and things that are beyond our knowledge base and that sort of thing. That was never the argument. I would argue for rational will, and I think that even if we actually do not have rational will, people behave as though we do. And that's obviously not a proof for it, but it is an inconsistency that I think belies something. I'm not sure exactly what, but I think it's something that we need to come to terms with if we are ever to reach any kind of a fuller understanding of our station, the nature of our existence, our place, our relationships to one another, and that sort of thing. So I'm going to leave that there for now. Thanks for watching.